Welcome back. Before we finish off this section and head over to your assessment test, I want to quickly discuss a concept known as list comprehensions. List comprehensions are a unique way of quickly creating a list with Python. So if you're ever in a situation where you find yourself using a for loop along with an append statement that goes over and over again through a for loop to create a list comprehensions are a good alternative to this method. So to show you what I'm actually talking about, let's jump to a Jupyter notebook. Okay, let's imagine that we have a string called myString, and we say it's hello. And I want to make a list of every character in this. What you may do is start off with an empty list, such as this, and then say for letter in my string, append the letter to my list. And then after running this, if I check out what my list looks like now, I get back HELLO. So this is something that's really common for beginners to do. They create an empty list, and then they iterate through some other iterable, and then they append whatever object that is or whatever element that is to their list. There's actually a more efficient way to do this in Python, and by efficient, I really mean taking up less space in code. As far as the actual computation, it's about the same, so don't worry about saving computational time using this method. If you find this method too confusing, you can always go back to the for loop. But let me show you how you could do this exact same thing on a single line. What you do is you essentially break down this entire for loop. So I'm going to copy this again here and then slowly break it down to be in the format of a list comprehension. So first off, all of this code and logic here in some format is actually going to go inside these braces. And we basically reorganize this. We say for letter in my string, we're going to delete all this and then put letter right here. So now we have letter for letter in my string. Cut that, paste it in here, run that, and now we have the exact same thing, HELLO. So what's actually happening here? The logic is essentially a flattened out for loop, because we're going to assume that the only action being taken in this for loop is just appending whatever element you want to your same list. What list comprehension does is it just takes that element for element in some other iterable object, such as another list. So let's show you another example. We can say my list is equal to open and close square brackets, x for x in Word. And then if I check out my list, I get back WORD. And just like a for loop, this is a temporary variable name that you can call whatever you want. So we could call it just QWE, and as long as it matches here, let's make it Word2 so we can see that it's actually working, Word2. So again, it's just element for element in, and then some sort of string, list, or other iterable object. So often what you're going to see is something like this. My list is equal to open and close square braces, and then what I'm going to do here is say x for x in range 0 to 11. So now my list are those actual numbers. So instead of saying x, what I'm going to do is say num, because that's a little clearer to me. So I have this flattened out for loop. Now you may be wondering, well, is this all it can do? And that's actually not all it can do. In fact, you can begin to perform operations on this first variable name. So if I wanted to grab the square of every number in that range, what I could do is perform the operation here. So I'm saying number squared for num in range 0 to 11. So then when I rerun this, now I get back the squared versions of that. So what this is doing is essentially flattening out this for loop right here, where this letter or this number, whatever it happens to be, is basically as if you had done squared here. That's what we're doing when we say squared right here. So you're appending whatever this happens to be. Now you can also add in if statements into this. So let's say we only wanted to grab the even numbers from this. What I could do is say my list is equal to open and close square brackets, and then say x for x in range 0 to 11. And then after this is where you add in the if statement. You can say if x mod 2 is equal to 0. So remember, that's the check if something's even. So I'm saying x for x in this range of numbers, but only if when you say mod 2 of that x, it's equal to 0. And now when I check the result of my list, it's only the even numbers. And I could also do something like this, x to the power of 2 here, and now I only have the square of the even numbers. Now you can do some more complex things, like more complex arithmetic here. So I'm going to show you one last example. Let's imagine we have a list of temperatures in Celsius. So 0, 10, 20, let's say 34.5. And then I wanted them in Fahrenheit. So let's do that. A list called Fahrenheit. I will set that equal to, and then there's some sort of formula for the conversion. And the formula is 9/5 times the temperature in Celsius plus 32. So here I have quite a complex arithmetic arrangement, but then I'm going to say for temp in Celsius. And then when I run that and I see Fahrenheit again, I see back the temperatures in Fahrenheit. So 0 degrees Fahrenheit is 32, or excuse me, 0 degrees Celsius is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to break this down as a for loop just so we can see the connection. This is the exact same thing as me doing the following, as me saying Fahrenheit, set that equal to an empty list, and then say for F-O-R, temp in Celsius, Fahrenheit, append, and then just doing this sort of thing right here. Just grabbing this and putting it in there. So this is the exact same thing, and if I check out Fahrenheit, I get back the same result. So what I would suggest is you basically freeze this video right here and see if you can build out the comparisons between this flattened version for list comprehension and this version for the for loop. Because all we're really doing here is flattening out and getting rid of this append functionality, because it's essentially implied by default when you put it all in this list comprehension. Now often I'm asked by students as they review their list comprehension, hey, am I able to do if-else statements inside of a list comprehension? And the answer to that is yes, you can, but the order is going to be a little different. And before I show you this, I want to emphasize that above all else, readability and reproducibility in your Python code should be the most important thing, not trying to do slick one-liners. And list comprehensions can kind of fool you into thinking you're becoming a really good programmer, when in fact you're writing just kind of really one-liners that are really ugly, and it's hard to read when you come back to them a month later. So keep that in mind. I am going to show you right now how to do it, but I myself typically don't do this because it's really hard to read once you come back to it. But let me show you how to use an if and else statement inside of a list comprehension. So the way we do this is, let's say results. We're going to set that equal to, and the order is a little reversed here. You say x if, and then you have your if statement. So we'll say x if x mod 2 is equal to 0. And then we have our else statement, else do odd. And then we say for x in, and then we can say range 0 to 11. So this is kind of weird because now the order has been totally reversed, different than what I said up here. So that's why I also recommend that you kind of take it easy when you're doing if-else statements in a list comprehension, because it can quickly become unreadable or confusing because the order is different. But when you run this and we check out our results, now I have a list where I have the even numbers, or basically the numbers where you mod 2 is equal to 0, and then the string odd if that's not the case. So that's you can use if-else in a list comprehension. Notice how the order is now different than just a simple if statement inside of a list comprehension. Also keep in mind that a month later when you're coming back to this, it's definitely going to take a little longer to read and understand what you were doing here. So be kind to your future self. One last note I want to show is you can also do nested loops in a list comprehension. This is going to be another topic where I would say take it easy at first because it can become quite confusing. But let me show you what I mean by a nested loop. We haven't actually seen a nested loop yet, so we'll introduce one first. Let's imagine I have my list as an empty list there, and I say for x in, and let's say 246. And then inside of this, I'm going to make another for loop. We'll say for y in, and let's say 100, 200, 300. I'm going to take my list, and I'm going to append x times y. So I run that, and then outside of those for loops, I print out my list, and I get back 200, 400, 600, etc., all the way to the end. So what is this actually doing? Well, it's going to take 2, multiply it by each of these numbers. Then it's going to take 4, multiply it by each of those numbers, resulting in this. and then it's going to take 6, multiply it by each of those numbers, and then result in that. So let me choose a couple numbers here that will make it even more obvious what's happening. I'm going to say 1, 10, and then we'll make this last one 1,000. So when I rerun this code, you can see here 2, 22,000, 4, 44,000, 6, 60, 60,000. Now, there is a way to do this with list comprehension. Again, you're going to sacrifice readability here, but it is possible. The way you would do this is the following manner. We would say my list is equal to, and then we say x times y for x in, and then you pass in that list. So in this case, we're going to say 246, and then we'll say for y in, and then here we'll say 1, 10, 1,000. And when we check out my list, we get back the same results. Now again, definitely be careful with this because this is really hard to read, especially when you're coming back to it later. So it's possible, but I would suggest always try to do readability first. Okay, that's the basics of list comprehension. We'll play around with them a little bit in some of your exercises and projects, but it'll definitely take a while before this becomes part of your normal flow in programming of Python. All right, thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.